If you could create, if it had technicians and you had to go to someone's house, the scalability process was very, very simple.
That's the answer for me. That's the reason I love this business. It's the reason I love the home service business. Is because you can create the systems, create the follow through, create the customer journey and the experience, and then scale it and watch it explode.
If you could create, if it had technicians and you had to go to someone's house, the scalability process was very, very simple.
That's the answer for me. That's the reason I love this business. It's the reason I love the home service business. Is because you can create the systems, create the follow through, create the customer journey and the experience, and then scale it and watch it explode. Who's encouraging you as the business owner? Where do you find your confidence? There's nobody behind you saying, "Hey, good job, kid. Keep it up. You're doing great." That doesn't exist in our world. So you have to find a way to fight, stay focused, and stay driven through the noise. All right. Welcome to Through the Noise with Trevor Steele. I'm excited about today's podcast. I have a friend who is a serial entrepreneur with a ridiculous amount of leadership skills and systems-oriented mindset, and I can't wait for him to jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mickey Lyles.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Trevor. Look forward to a great discussion today.
Yeah, man. So Mickey is just a country boy from Sumter, South Carolina. Humble beginnings. His story is pretty remarkable. I'm sure we'll end up jumping into that pretty quickly. We already started having good conversation before we jumped in, and I said, "Wait, we need to go ahead and stop this because this is good stuff, and I think people need to hear it." So just really quickly, I'll give you an intro. Mickey has owned several businesses through his life. He's been involved in a lot of different. He's a golfer as well. He's an amazing golfer, but through his life, he started real estate holdings. He is now a consultant. He owns a local franchise called Eggs Up Grill. He is a partner at Your Service Plumbing, and he took it from, help me out, give me a quick synopsis of your growth.
Yeah, we're still in the early stages of upscaling, but here in the last couple of years, we've 3x it from about 500,000 in revenue to 2 million, with 10 million in our crosshairs for sure.
That's awesome. And then your experience in the pest control business as well with your consulting business. I know you.
Yeah, for sure. Joined a company back in 2014 in a bit of a consulting / operation manager's role, and was part of a great team there. And we were able to scale that business to about 20 million, and very happy for the whole who sold it for just an asinine amount of money in 2021. And so definitely familiar with exit strategies to private equity firms and things like that. But that was a venture that gave me a lot of insight into scalability and what it looks like to build a team from 35 people to 250 people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just really quickly let's dive into a little bit more about you and kind of maybe a short synopsis of your story and where you started and your what you got.
Absolutely. Grew up in Sumter, South Carolina. It's kind of funny. It sounds like one of our grandparents' old stories, where they walk through the snow both ways to get to school. But the fact of the matter is, we grew up on a dirt road in a small 1,100 square foot house that my mom had built using USDA money after her and my dad got divorced when I was about 2 years old. She remarried, and they had a couple kids. And so I'm the oldest of 4 boys. Grew up my whole high school career. Through school, we were all together as a family. Did play golf in high school, had dreams of being a professional golfer. And, the PGA Tour's ad is correct. These guys are good, as they say. And so much harder than most people think it is. And so I ended up for a period of time getting into the maintenance side of things, studying to be a golf course superintendent, doing some agronomy. But I realized really early on there wasn't a lot of money in that.
Yeah.
And you got to be less than 1% at the big private clubs to make that kind of work. And so I kind of packed up and came back home and pivoted and tried to figure out how to start learning about business. And much like I'm sure a lot of your listeners, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. I just started surrounding myself by a lot of people a lot smarter than me and really trying to understand why people had it differently than I did and wanted to learn that. Early age of 23, I opened my first business, and it was a locksmith company. And people say, well, how in the world did you get into locksmithing? And I said, man, it's a super, super short and super cool story. My mom had moved into a new house, and we were having dinner over there one night, and she said, this town really needs another locksmith. I've been calling the locksmith for 3 weeks and can't get him here. And my little young entrepreneurial mind went off. And, back then we didn't have internet, which is crazy. I don't think I'm all that old, but we didn't have the internet at that stage. And so I got into buying some magazines and looking in the old classifieds in the back and found a little locksmith school out in Kentucky. And signed up, went out there for a month and came back and got a loan from the banker for $19,000 and opened a locksmith business with one van and did very well. Did a lot of cash flow in that business and ended up doing, nowadays, really, I know it more as a franchising opportunity than a reality. What I was really doing was kind of licensing. I would go buy a van, hire a guy, set him up, let him make his own money, and then I would just take a monthly fee for basically
before you even knew what it was.
Well, I really didn't know it was franchising. We didn't have any type of heavy duty legal paperwork, but they couldn't afford to set the van up, and I could. So I would put them in a van, teach them how to locksmith, let them go earn their own income, and then I would take a monthly rental fee, if you will, on the van and the equipment.
That's incredible.
So anyway, I started that at 23 and did that for a couple of years, and then sold that to somebody and exited for, at that age, what I thought was, life-changing money, but these days you realize it's not as much as what you think it is. And then partnered up with some people, and we opened a car dealership and rode that for a while, and then went through the 2008, 2009 kind of economy crash. And so once again, you have to pivot, right? I mean, successful people find a way to figure it out. There's so many of these sayings, Trevor, sound cliche, but
that's true.
They work because they're true.
The older I get, the more I realize it is true.
Yeah. And they're not gimmicky sayings, but that when you fall down, you got to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and reinvent yourself many times and repivot. And so I did. But I can tell you the car dealership closing in the 2008, 2009 kind of recession was probably one of the greatest things happened to me. And I'll tell you why briefly is because for a short period of time, I got thrust back into having to work for somebody else. And so here I was, this small country guy from Sumter, South Carolina. My horizons, while I was fighting to become something, were pretty narrow coming from a small town like that. And this company that I took a job with was based out of Brooklyn, New York. And I'll tell you the truth, I really didn't even know what I was being asked to do. I just knew that they had a salary and I had a family to feed. And so they flew me up to New York to pick up my company vehicle and my computer and credit card and cell phone. And when I got up there and kind of realized it was like a regional sales role, man, I got to see some great parts of this country. I mean, I remember the first time going to Dallas and Chicago and St. Louis and Baltimore, Maryland and Philadelphia, and just getting to see that there was this whole world out there.
Right.
And this small little world that I had grown up in this small town in South Carolina, man, it was just, there was a lot happening. And so, man, did I meet some really cool people. And I met some people that were doing some pretty big things. And I started a notebook. And I said, man, I got to learn all I can learn from these guys because one day I want to be one of these guys. That was just a really pivotal, moment, not only in my life, but in my career, because I learned about scalability. I learned about leadership. I learned about what these guys were doing to invest in teams and how to get people to follow them and be committed. And I'll tell you what else I learned is that there's a lot of different ways to do it. And one way isn't necessarily better or worse than the other. It depends a lot on your situation. It depends on the people you have on your staff. It depends on the area of the country you're in and what your beliefs are. I'm in the Bible Belt. I'm from South Carolina. We didn't cuss each other. We treat each other with respect, and we said yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and things like that. And you get off an airplane in the Northeast, and F-U's the term of endearment.
That's right.
And you got to learn that pretty quick. How you communicate with different people. And so that was a great time, and I spent about 5 years there. And I remember, and I don't say this to impress you, I say this to impress upon you how much you can learn from other people. But I remember a time that there was a consultant that this company I was working for called in, and he went around and did individual interviews with all the employees. And I remember getting a phone call about 3 weeks after the interview that I did with him. We were all scared. We thought we were interviewing for our job. We really didn't know why they had this consultant in there talking to us. And about 3 weeks after that interview, I get a call from our ownership, and they said, wow, I don't know what your conversation was with this consultant, but he said the average conversation with the other employees stories was about an hour and yours was 5 hours. We just couldn't stop. And he said, we got you in the wrong seat on the bus. You got a lot of really good ideas and ways that we can scale and bring some growth to our organization. And that really was the beginning of a shift for me to realize that I had learned some things that created a special talent that I needed to do it for myself, not just for everybody else.
Right. Yeah. So if I were to describe you, my understanding of you in business, I would say you're a home service expert. And that's been my experience just from our conversations. How did you end up here in the home service industry from there? And why do you think you're gravitated to it?
Yeah, so a couple really good questions and a couple of reasons why I think home services is kind of where it's at. So the company that I went to work for out of New York, they manufactured pest control products. And so I knew nothing about that. I was just, like I said, looking for a job, for a way to feed my family. In working for them across the country, I got to meet thousands of independently owned pest control operators, guys that were building, guys and gals that were building pest control. What I saw in that, because I had spent some time in retail, like for example, the car industry is retail. And we saw that the economy drastically affected that retail division. Also in college, a little bit of time working in a franchise jewelry store, and we could see the ups and downs with the economy, right? It's a need, a want, not a need. And what I saw very quickly in termite and pest control is that it was more of an essential business. And we know now, having gone through COVID many, many years later, that the government kind of defined what essential businesses were. And I can tell you that pest control, plumbing, HVAC, all of those guys were defined as essential businesses. So the home services is so powerful because kind of regardless of what the economy's doing, if your HVAC's broken, you live in Florida or South Carolina, you're going to get it fixed.
That's it.
You're going to find a way to get it fixed. If your plumbing's broken, you can't flush the toilet or get hot water, you're going to find a way to get it fixed, kind of regardless of what your job situation is. And so I think those businesses are a lot more sustainable. Now, I jumped a little bit to the end of the story. How I ended up there through the termite and pest control was not only through personal experience, but through, much like you, going to conferences, following and listening to powerful sales leaders and trainers who all have content out there, books. I'm a big Maxwell guy, Dave Ramsey, different people that I followed. I started recognizing that in a lot of arenas, whether it's marriage ministry, whether it's sales tactics, whether it's how to scale a business, you have all of these voices. And if you really dig into them and you read all of them and you listen to all of them, they're all telling you the same thing. It's just packaged differently.
Sure.
They have different deliveries, they have different ways of, different analogies they use, but at its core, they're all still kind of the same message. And so what I realized was scaling a home services business, it didn't matter if the deliverable was termite and pest control, HVAC, plumbing, pool cleaning, pressure washing. If it had technicians and you had to go to someone's house, the scalability process was very, very simple.
That's the answer for me. That's the reason I love this business. It's the reason I love the home service business, is because you can create the systems, create the follow through, create the customer journey and the experience, and then scale it and watch it explode. That's just my favorite part. And it's a constant, organic, growing beast, right?
Yeah.
The guys come in and they have a problem from the day. I love it. I'm like, great, let's solve it. That's perfect. How do we fix this? How do we turn this into a procedure and an operation for going forward? And then I can go to sleep at night knowing that we fixed the problem that will never happen again.
100%.
And everybody's on the same page. We put it into the systems, and it's the thing I love about this business.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people like to take guys like you and I, and certainly people that are far more successful than us, that have built $100 million service companies, and they say, well, it's a bit of a manipulation. You try to convince your clients, you try to convince your employees that you're really doing what's in the best interest of the client, when in reality, behind closed doors, you're building a sales company that doesn't have the client's best interest at heart. And I want to say, personally, I disagree with that 100%. I think that at the end of the day, part of the journey and part of the joy is knowing that we solve somebody's problem and knowing that they sleep better at night because they don't have to worry about the water heater leaking all over their floor, or their HVAC unit is repaired. And then when the grandkids come over or when they go to sleep, they're not going to wake up in a bed full of sweat because their air is working correctly.
Right.
Like, solving the customer's problem is what it's really all about, you know? Because at the end of the day, we're people serving people. And that's really what we're here for, is to help each other.
Right.
Now, in scaling businesses and growing businesses and try to be successful in our own rights, then people have we're just America, baby. You do anything you want to do, right? There are those that choose to step outside the box and work a little harder and do things to create a little more monetary gain for themselves through scalability. But whether it's a one-man operator or $100 million company, we're all still out there to help people.
Right. Yeah. So yesterday, that is a perfect example. I love efficiency. It's my favorite word on the planet, efficiency. And honestly, when things aren't efficient, my world, and this is part of my superpower, my ADHD just takes over, and I'm like, how do I fix this? I got to fix it right now. This can't ever happen again. So that's created a superpower in our business, because if we're not completely organized from top down, then I'm rendered useless. So it's forced my hand, which in turn creates scalability, which creates the opportunity for growth. Right. And so yesterday, perfect example, I go to a client's house to do a quote. We call them go quotes. I stand with him. I think I'm like the third or fourth business to come to the door. And he said within 10 minutes, he knew I was the company that he was going to hire, period. He didn't tell me this until afterwards, right? And then I do my little spiel, my sales pitch. And then I say, give me a few minutes. And I walk around with my measuring tool, get all the measurements, put together package A, B, and C pricing. I go back to the door and I'm explaining it to him. And about halfway through the explanation, he said, don't worry about it. Give me your best package. We've already decided we're going with you. You're significantly more expensive than the other companies, but we're comfortable with you.
Yeah.
So that efficiency of that process is the reason that he chose us, not because I'm a better, nicer person. I'm probably not. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I don't really want to spend my time talking to people out in the field, but it's, I do it so I can learn the systems, build the systems, scale the systems, and teach someone else to do it.
It's funny, when I ran into you guys at the home show a couple weekends ago, you had stepped down the aisle there and your wife told me you're an introvert. And I said, Trevor's an introvert? I was like, no, not the guy that's trying to blow up all these businesses that I know. And she goes, no, it is cool. He really is. It was shocking for me to hear that. For sure.
Yeah, most people say that.
But along those lines that you're saying, I have a pitch that I tell all my clients and, of course, my own employees is, our motto, our slogan at Your Service Plumbing is service beyond expectations. And so it's very simple for a home services company. You're a homeowner and I'm a homeowner. And when a client or a homeowner calls a home services company, what is their minimum expectation? Their minimum expectation is get their problem solved. It doesn't matter if they're calling Chuck in a truck or if they're calling the largest company in the area. They expect the problem to be solved. And again, whether it's $100 or whether it's $10,000. And so how do we separate ourselves through service beyond expectations? And so what you just described, taking the measurements, being dressed professionally, treating the customer professionally, having a good option process. And that's one of the things we're working on right now. And I'll tell you, we got a long way to go to get where I want it to be in the plumbing business, but it's the same thing. Offer options. As a data point that some of your listeners might be interested in, we know that there's always research being done. So we use this word they. They did a study. And who is they? Well, it's universities, it's different people. You got to trust your sources. But the data that you can all go online and look at is that 65% of Americans will pick the middle option if you give them three options. You think about when you drive through the drive-through at any of the fast food chains, and I love this little move they do. Would you like to make that medium or large? Now, it sounds like two options,
right?
But small's an option. But if you don't tell them anything, you're going to get medium. So if you want
absolutely
small,
true.
You have to ask for small.
That's great.
But they don't give you that option verbally. They say, would you like that medium or large? And so 65% take the medium. Since COVID, we've been thrust into this thing that I'm sure this is very controversial, but this whole tipping thing. We never used to have to tip at Chipotle or Zaxby's, these fast casual places. Tipping, the word tip stands for to ensure prompt service. That's what tips stands for.
I did not know that.
To ensure prompt service. So if I'm going through the Zaxby's drive-through, if I'm just walking up to the counter and grabbing my to-go bag, there's an argument to be made, why should I have to tip? But now they've gotten in this thing. All the mall stores do it. They spin that a spring round test. 15, 18, 21.
Getting a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
They
they come
flip the iPad around and they want, and the only options are 10%, 12%, 15%, whatever.
That's right. And 65% of people just will hit the middle option. And so, I tell my guys, I go, well, I'm not good at sales. I'm not asking you to be a salesperson. I'm asking you to be an option giver. Well, I don't know if they can afford it. It's not your job to decide whether they can afford it or to make the decision for them. Right. So this is another one of those that I start calling them Mickeyisms, but I didn't invent it. I certainly stole it. Some will, some won't. So what? We give options and we let the customer decide. And we lean on the data that we know that 65% of people will pick middle options. So in your example, you won that account because you acted professionally. You provided service beyond expectations. You did. They wanted their house pressure washed regardless of who did it. That was the result they were looking for. But you gave them something beyond that, and I love that story, and that's really where we all should be if we're trying to scale and grow home service companies.
So I want to talk a little more about the word expectation, because I think so many people devalue that word in the home service industry. The expectation is that you're going to show up when you say you're going to show up. You're going to answer the phone. You're going to do exactly what you say you're going to do, and you're going to do it for a reasonable price, and you're going to do a great job. That's the expectation. Most people have, that's their marketing.
Yeah.
We answer the phone when you call.
Right.
No, yeah, that's your job. Do your job.
I agree 100%.
So that's not, added service. That's not additional benefit for the buyer. The buyer's expecting those things. So you have to think way beyond that and put yourself in the customer's shoes and try and simplify, number one, because you don't want to, most personality types don't want to deal with a complicated process.
Right.
Especially this day and age where you can go on Amazon, push one button, set it to reoccurring, and then every month your vitamins show up and you don't do anything, right? So they don't want that kind of experience. They want you to do what their expectations are and more, and then simplify it, make it easier, have them enjoy the process while you're doing it. So and you have to have company culture and keep your people excited to come to work every day. Like it's getting harder and harder and harder to stand out. And you have to have a caricature, you doing making a funny face for a logo and a brand, and it's getting harder and harder and harder to stand out. I think if you just go back to the roots, and I think this is going to happen in every industry, but it's going to start with ours. Customer service, communication, transparency, all of those things are going to start to take the lead in what people value, because we're getting sold a bag of goods online. You could go online right now and look up pressure washing companies, and they basically all look the same. You don't know any better. You might go in and one will have 400 reviews and the other one will have 5. That's a good indicator. But even that is starting to be manipulated, right?
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. But when the neighbor says, I had a great experience with Clean Image pressure washing, that's the company they're going to go with. Period.
Right. That's right. And I want to come back to the expectations thing. You keyed off on something there in a second, but to go back to your point now about the bill of goods, the bag of goods, and the online. Me and a new partner just signed a deal with a new company out of Colorado. Super excited about it. Going to be bringing it to the Grand Strand area called Snooze Mattress. And while the company's called Snooze Mattress, they also will be carrying some furniture lines and things of that nature. And here was our biggest one. We were doing our due diligence on this. We were looking very deeply into this move of consumers buying mattresses online, Purple, Casper, these different things. And we said, listen,
Huge companies.
are we a little too late to this party? Is brick and mortar a thing of the past when mattresses are concerned? People are, now you've got to look at who your buyer is. And what I'm talking about here is going to tie back into that expectations conversation. But when you talk about, we're sitting in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, one of your listeners might be in California or Texas or New York. You have to understand who your client base is, and especially in home services. And that's what I'm going to touch on in a second. But what we found is that 3 or 4 years ago, particularly going into COVID, those online mattress companies exploded. They exploded. They billion-dollar companies, right? But here's what's happening. They realized that keeping up with the shipping costs, keeping up with the demand of all that wasn't what they thought it was going to be. We also found out that over 50% of the people that bought online, having not tried those products previously, were returning them. So their returns were through the roof. And so now in the last 18 months, those companies are now signing with brick and mortar companies. So for example, when we get our brick and mortar open, hopefully this year for Snooze Mattress, we're going to be able to carry some of those online brands, and they're not going to be online anymore, only anymore. Right. And so, people want to buy from people. That don't know will ever die. But we do have to understand that we're not selling our parents anymore. And admittingly, I'm an old school guy. I probably would have done a lot better being raised in the 50s. I'm in that the last of Gen Xers that are still hanging on to the old school Southern values. But right now, our clients in home services, our clients in mattress space, still is shifting towards the Gen Zs, the millennial back end of millennials. And so even some of them are shifting a little bit of that buying from online, not certainly not away from Amazon for toilet paper, but on big ticket purchases like that.
Yeah.
So how does that impact back to the home services conversation is expectation. So if you bought a mattress online, you had an expectation that you were going to get it cheaper and that you were going to still get a good quality, comfortable product. Well, what happened is maybe you got it cheaper, but it wasn't comfortable. And so then you end up with returns, and now they want to go back in the store and try everything. So when you talk about the expectations, I couldn't agree with you more. We as consumers and our customers being consumers all have that basic expectation to show up on time, treat them with respect, the things that you mentioned. But guess who else has expectations is our employees. And it's getting very, very difficult to give someone a 1.5-page job description that's got 20 bullet points on it. But these are the things that I expect you to do for X amount of time. And then you look up at 90 days or 6 months and you go, this person's completing half of what their job description is. And then you go have a PIP meeting with them, a performance meeting. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm going to need more money if you expect me to do that. But yet, that was part of the original job description, right? And so setting yourself apart. So there's two things, right? How do we become a company that has service beyond expectations for the client? And then another phrase that I stole from somebody somewhere along the way is, how do we become the employer of choice? And how do I have, and so I'm just going to, be a little bit of a plug for our local area. There's a small pest control company that works there. Local guy owns. He was in the Marine for a long time. I think he retired from the Marines, and he's had this pest control company for like 30 years. He's got a guy who's worked with him for 19 years. And he's got another guy who's worked with him for 22 years.
Oh man!
And I called this guy up. I said, "Man,
what are you doing?
What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And Trevor, I'm glad you're sitting down when I tell you how we do. So let me tell you, and this is why I haven't mentioned the company's name because I don't want to put his business out there for this aspect. But he pays his guys $400 a week, $10 an hour. And I almost came off the couch. I said, "What? Come again?" He goes, "Hang on." He said, "That's their base pay." He said, "But there's another $500 a week bonus that they can get every week. But in order to get that $500 a week bonus, they have to wash their truck every day." He gives them a $10 roll of quarters on Mondays. They have to go to the car wash and wash their truck every day. They have to come in with their shirts tucked in and pressed with a crease down the sleeves every day. And there's these other things, and I don't recall every single bullet point, but there's these things that this is expectation.
Standard.
This is standard. And so at the end of it, they're paying you $900 a week if you just do the things that I need you to do to meet my company standard. And of course, they still have bonuses and things to make you more money, sales and things like that. But I tried that for about a month. And let me tell you how many people I could hire on that plan. 0.0, right? So he's been able to pull off something 20 years ago that is very, very difficult to pull off now, and that's to get people to perform to your standard for a reasonable compensation. So
people need that example, right? So I think if you had one person on your staff that you knew you could run this through with them, the performance pay structure, and then they started to find success in it, and the other techs want to find success in it, then maybe that's how you unroll it. But I'm going through the same pain points right now. I'm trying to unveil a new performance pay model, and it's a struggle. Because well, there's a lot of reasons. I won't dig into that. We had this conversation at lunch maybe a year ago, and that's when my mind shifted, and I started thinking, okay, I like that base pay thing. I like the fact that they have to follow A, B, C, and D in order to qualify for it. I like that it's based on the week, not the year, not the quarter. Like if you don't do it this week, it affects this week's check.
Right.
Is that an instant?
Yeah,
I love that. So I started implementing 5-star reviews. My techs, for every 5-star review they get $20 extra on their check. For every social media picture that they take, like a before and after, or maybe an action shot or a video, every time they send in a picture that we use, it's $10 per picture.
Right.
We have tips that come in that are part of the bonus structure, and we've got incentives for upsells that are part of the bonus structure and all this stuff, but it's just the tracking and the data input and the, if you don't have the CRM that can do all of these things for you, it's a nightmare. So that's what we're currently working on. I'm trying to build something out that can do that.
But don't feel alone. I mean, I've been working on that for a year. I actually 3 separate pay plans in 2023. And like you said, even the ones that tend to work, the technicians, the motivated technicians, then it becomes a logistical nightmare.
Right.
And of course, we're always looking for what's scalable. And I ask my team all the time, and I ask myself in the mirror, this work for this month, but what if you had 10 sales guys, 30 sales guys, 60 sales guys? This isn't scalable. And so that continues to be a big hurdle to overcome. With that, I have found, just for what it's worth, that a performance-based pay plan that's a percentage of revenue of some sort tends to be the thing that's driven the companies that I've worked with. I'll tell you, in 2015, after I'd gone to work with a pest control company in a consulting role and really functioned as an operations manager, I did build, and it's funny because I'll be very honest with you, I built that pay plan that we implemented out of my own head, but after I got into the world, I realized it was out there. It was out there very readily. Call it PPC, performance-based compensation. But I'll tell you some numbers that are staggering. In 2015, our technician, and what I'm going to call ancillary sales, meaning I sent them to a job. We had an expectation of revenue coming in for the job I sent them to, but then them selling a second or third line to the customer. So that would be the ancillary sale. In 2015 was $78,000 total across all technicians. 2 years later, it was $1.1 million being on a performance-based pay. And you hit the nail on the head. It took one guy, and I'll never forget this guy's name was Donnie, and he figured it out. And every month he was like opening that check, and he was like, guys, I got $2,000 bonus, $2,200 bonus. And the other guy over there with nothing or $78.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Donnie bought a bass boat, and everybody else wants to know how Donnie's got a boat, and they don't have a boat. And it was one of those times where it was hard to explain at times. It was hard to get people to say, but I want $20 an hour. And we said, no, it's $12 an hour plus commission. And then it finally caught on. And once everybody, so we just had to stay tenacious, and we just had to stick with the plan. And it took us 2 years, but eventually it caught on, and we rode that right all the way to 21 when I almost sold the company. Never changed. It's one of the things that I'm stretching and calling for now in this plumbing business. It's a plan that will stick and survive all the ups and downs. And what a blessing it would be to look back and go, for 7 years, we haven't changed our pay plan because it works.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that a little bit, because I know me personally, and this may be my generation, it may be a generational thing, that I want a task and I want to complete it in one day. Mm-hmm. If I can't complete it in one day, there's this subliminal messaging going on in my brain that makes it hard for me to continue to chisel away at that thing.
Yeah.
I've figured out ways to do that, but performance pay is not a one-day implementing process.
Right.
It's something that takes years. Do you have any recommendation for business owners that are struggling to implement something and just want to give up?
Yeah. So what I did with what we're doing now, and it's a version of what we had at the pest control company, is I found that you have to have at worst weekly notification, but if it's possible, daily. And so I've created these dashboards where I can email them to the technicians every morning and let them know exactly where they're at every day. That way they know if they have a goal. Like I have a technician that wants to buy a house. So one of the things that and we can talk about this if we have time, but one of the things that I think helps create making you the employer of choice is that you don't treat an employee like an employee. You invest in them, you coach them until they just show that the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? And so I try to have these little 20, 30-minute individual meetings with each employee. What can I do for you? It's part of the Zig Ziglar thing. You help everybody else accomplish their dreams, and all of your dreams will be fulfilled. And so in investing in that, I'm able to find out what their wants and needs are. And it is astonishing to me how many guys don't have very many dreams or wants monetarily.
Right. They don't even ask themselves those questions.
They're satisfied.
Generational curses.
They're satisfied with their status quo. But you're going to always have the ones that break that mold. And I got a kid working for me right now, super, super cool guy, 21 years old, wants to buy a house. And so I had laid out a systematic plan for him to be able to buy.
That's got to feel good.
It feels amazing to be able to invest in that. And then, of course, I've got to go above where I've got connections with people that are in the mortgage business and put his name on the map. And they're telling me the rules of the game. This is what he's going to need down. This is, and so we're having those meetings. And so he wants to make about $6,000 a month. And that's substantially more, probably about 35% more than the average guy's making. But I laid the plan out.
Right. Show him it's possible.
So I show him it's possible, and then I tell him every day, this is where you're at, this is where you're at. And I give him a green or red number. You're ahead or behind.
You can't tell me his numbers aren't better.
And they do. Every day they go up because he knows if he's behind or ahead. So I'm going to give you a great this week example. So we had a technician call out sick on Monday. Flu's been going around our area, or the stomach bug. And so he called out Monday. And so we had our huddle meeting, and tell this guy, listen, because he's got probably the best sales ability of the technicians we have on staff right now. I said, listen, because we're down to tech, we're probably $5,000 behind before we ever start today. I got to find $5,000 somewhere.
That's right.
And you're my guy to find it.
That's
and not only, if you go find it, since there's nobody else here to help you do it, you're going to sell it and perform a service, which means you get 100% of the commission, right? Within 2 hours, he had sold 6 toilets, one customer for $4,500.
And you're like, wait a minute, I might have you in the wrong seat.
That's exactly right. So you got to understand where your talent's at. But
thanks, Jimmy B. Appreciate you, buddy.
Here's the thing I don't think a lot of the independent owners think about. My consulting business got started off with the book. Oh, that's good. I bring up the book and then forget the email. It got started off with the email. And basically, it's about how technicians turn into business owners. The problem is they don't have this fundamental shift between being a technician and being a business owner. There you go. Trevor's got it on his bookshelf, and it looks like it's pretty well read.
This one's been read a few times.
And so what happens is a lot of these folks out there that are listening to this podcast, they started this business because they wanted to be the boss, and they think that once they become the boss, they can stroll in at 8:30 in the morning with a cup of coffee and go to a lunch, maybe go to the Rotary meeting or the home builders luncheon, and go pick your kids up at 3:30. Let me tell you something. This is not for faint heart. This is a lot of hours. And it's a lot of training, and it means get up to be in there and delivering these deals. Because that's the question they have, right? Well, who's doing this? Well, who's pulling the data? Well, it might be you at 9 o'clock at night to have a 7 a.m. huddle meeting the next day, to then pull each individual tech in office and say, "This is where you're at. This is what I need from you today."
So this is a great segue, and I always try to end up here in our podcast because the name of the podcast is Through the Noise, and what that really means is through the noise. Who's encouraging you as the business owner? Where do you find your confidence? There's nobody behind you saying, "Hey, good job, kid. Keep it up. You're doing great." That doesn't exist in our world. So you have to find a way to fight, stay focused, and stay driven through the noise. And basically for me, I don't know about you, but the noise is mostly in my head, saying, "You don't know what you're doing. This doesn't make any sense. You weren't built for this. You don't have what it takes.
Right.
This isn't going to pan out the way you think it is." So, my faith in God, every time I start to lean towards that depression or that angle of self-hatred, I give it to God as quickly as possible and say, "This is a lie. I don't know where this is coming from. This fear is not real.
Yeah.
You just take the wheel." Let's refocus. And usually that helps, and exercise and some other things help me clear my head and get back in line. But man, it took me 20 years as a business owner to finally figure out that I was my problem.
Right.
I was the thing holding me back. And until I learned how to refocus my attention and ignore the lies coming through from all angles.
Oh yeah.
It didn't just come from me.
Sure.
My headmaster always said, "If the shoe fits, Trevor." I put a post up last week, and everybody that went to school with me was like, "That's hilarious," because they remember this. I barely made it through high school.
Yeah.
Actually, the only reason I graduated high school is because my dad said he'd buy me a boat.
You got through, yeah.
So it's all about getting through the noise and who's encouraging you as a business owner, and how do you do it? How do you stay focused? And
so it's a great question. So obviously, like you do, I'm a big faith guy. I just think that if you don't have a relationship with God, that your life's out of balance, right?
Totally.
And I think that that's the thing. We're, a lot of folks like us, and a lot of people that listen to business podcasts, they're so focused on the dollar. and that's fine. And we want to just be better at life. It's not even about the money. We just have something
That's right.
in us that just makes us just want to rise to the top. But certainly, none of this matters without God. I often can actually get caught in a trap where I say, listen, at the end of my life, God's not going to say, Mick, you did a great job building a plumbing business or a restaurant or a consulting company or with real estate. He's going to say, what an awesome job you did investing in my people. And that's why I think these coaching meetings with employees are so important, because even if they leave you, if you can just leave them with a little bit better than you got them, if you can give them some encouragement, help them go find their dream. And this is one of my sayings to them. I only want to lose you to your dream. And they say, what do you mean? I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you know how to plumb? Yeah. Do you know how to flip eggs? If you work at eggs grill, yeah. You're a cook, yeah. Well, why would I want you to go down the street to my competitor to be a plumber or go to another restaurant? If you have a skill and I'm paying for that skill, why can we not work together?
Right.
And they sit there and they look at me and they don't have an answer to that. And I said, so I want to understand something. If you get disgruntled here, if there's something we're not doing that's not meeting your needs, I want to know about it. I can't fix what I don't know. And a lot of people say, I have an open door policy. I genuinely have an open door policy from the top to the bottom. But if you have a dream, if you want to be me, I want to empower you to do that. I will find a way to help you do it. I will shake your hand and I will help you all along the way, but I only want to lose you to your dream, right? Also, when you talk about the insecurities, and there is no greater power than to give it to God, but there's actually a clinical definition of that. It's called the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And it's where we just, how did I get here? And so I resonate with that. I'm sure, I am confident that there's people I went to high school with, and they would, if they saw something similar to this podcast, they would say, that's Mickey Lyles.
Oh, yeah.
That's the guy we grew up with. I mean, like I said, I grew up on a dirt road. I was just in the middle. I mean, I had friends, but I was just in the middle. I played some sports, but wasn't a standout on much of anything. But when you catch that gear and you decide that you want more for your life. So your question was, how do I work through that? And I have a really procedural process for it. I have a form that I was given, to be fair, but I've had it for about 10 years, and it's called the Success Blueprint. No, I said 10 years. I've had it for about 2 years. It's called the Success Blueprint. And what it forces you to do is it forces you to sit down and write your goals down. Because here's the thing. If you don't know your why, it's way too easy to give up. When you lose a service manager and you have to be the one to show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you go, man, I've been doing this for 25 years. I thought I was beyond this. Why am I having to be here at 6 o'clock in the morning? You need to be able to go to your refrigerator or go to your nightstand. You need to be able to look at that Success Blueprint and know your why. You need to know why I'm trying to do this. You need to know what your goals are. For me, I won't get into a lot of them because I have a lot of goals, but I have 2 kids in college right now. Why? I need to take care of them. I need to get them, help get them through college. I got a third one on the way that's in high school. I want to create a different family tree. I want to create that there's something for my grandchildren, which is breaking the mold of our my family lineage, particularly on my father's side. So you have to know your why. And I think if you lose focus of your why, the pressure can become too much. The amount of work that it takes can become too much. But if you stay focused on the why, then you're able to push through the hard times and say, I'm not doing this for them, I'm doing it for my family or whatever your why is.
Right. And it's funny because earlier we talked about cliches. If you'd have asked me 7 years ago what I thought about the saying, oh, well, you got to know your why, I would be like, okay, that's some Tony Robbins,
exactly,
mumbo jumbo, but it's not. It is not. It's a simple fact that you have to stay focused because nobody's patting you on the back.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying, great job, kid, keep it up. So you have to be able to, if you start to feel overwhelmed, I'm speaking for myself here, you have to be able to stop everything and go, okay, why am I doing this?
Right.
Why am I doing this? And then you have to go back to your reminders. And so I literally have my very simple, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. One of my favorite verses. There's a check to myself for $1 million from my home service company. It's going to be a while before I cash that, but I will cash that check. So this is just a simple reminder for me of why I'm doing it. So if you're having a horrible day, look through these pictures. How could I have a bad day if I look through this? This is my family. This is my why. This is what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
So I've been called. I say this a lot. I don't know if anybody can resonate with it. Maybe you can. I've been called to great sacrifice. I know that. I pay myself a very ridiculously low salary for my home
Yeah.
service company. And I know that I've been called to have great sacrifice in order to build the thing that I've been called to build. And I don't know where that's going to end up. I know that I have a goal and a vision, but that's not the thing that drives me. The thing that drives me is building something and helping people along the way. There's nothing better than when an old employee comes back 7, 8 years later and says, "Hey man, I just want you to know you were the best boss I ever had."
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Super
you
powerful.
cry because it's something that you worked so hard for.
Yeah.
So
Dave Ramsey has a saying, and he applies it to where he's just talking about financial literacy, where he says, "Live today, so that live like no one else today, so that one day you can live like no one else." And again, he's talking about living on meek salary and budget all the day, so that you can do well. But that same statement, right? It applies to the work ethic. Live today, so that one day you can live like no one else. So that means you might have to put in the 13, 14. Yesterday, me and my partner, we're in the middle right now of doing some retooling of our warehouse, our inventory management, and some things that take a lot of effort. When you have 1,500 SKUs and 6 figures in inventory sitting in there, and so it's required us to get there early in the morning and make sure that everybody's getting the parts that they need and getting there in the afternoons and getting returns and all of that. And so we've both been showing up every morning. And so like yesterday, I got there at 6:15 and I left the office at 6:42. I mean, it was all over a 12-hour day. That was just sitting at the office. And then there's still work to be done when you get home. And so you got to know your why, and you got to be able to press through. You got to understand that it's for its own reason, own purpose, and for a reason.
So there's a common theme. Every successful business owner that I interviewed, there's a common theme, and they are all humble. To their core, they're humble. We often display this level of confidence, like we've arrived and we're doing everything right. But the truth is, deep down, we're humble people who are constantly looking for ways to become more efficient and to become better. And we're never really satisfied with who we are personally in the moment.
Yeah.
Notice that I'm not who I want to be, and I don't think I ever will be.
Right.
But my hero, I think it was Matthew McConaughey, is my future self 10 years from now. That's who I want to be.
Right.
And if you keep that in the forefront of your mind, I'm good. My hero is me 10 years from now.
Right. Yeah.
That's pretty powerful as well.
I think it is powerful. And I'll tell you, it's a shame, Trevor, because as business owners and as managers and as leaders, we're often so misunderstood. I'm sure that if you march me out of here and put some of my employees from any of the businesses I'm involved in, that there will be a plethora of feelings about it. For some days we have to make hard decisions. Some days we come off as the jerk. Some days we might come off as arrogant because we're trying to get them to understand what they're capable of because we know what we've done to get where we're at. But if they genuinely knew in my heart what I wanted to do for them,
Right,
they would change the way they work with me and for me, right? But they don't always see it that way. Sometimes they just can't see the forest for the trees, as they say, and they think that it's a one-sided coin. But the fact of the matter is none of us can do any of this without other people. And so investing in others and bringing them along for the journey is really what it's all about.
love it.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time talking about mindset and what it's like to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner. I think that that's a little bit of an injustice for our listeners because, I mean, you're a systems person through and through.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think there's definitely going to be another maybe 2.0.
Yeah.
We need to have you back on, and we need to dive in a little bit deeper because we've had lunch several times. We've spoken several times on the phone. Your ability to fix a seemingly complicated situation and to automate it is next level. So I want to make sure we bring that to our audience. Maybe in 2.0.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love for you to have me back. And that's primarily what I focus on in my consulting company is literally helping companies develop the systems and processes they're missing so that they can create more time for themselves to work on their branding and growth and things of that nature. So yeah, I'd love to talk about it.
Well, tell us a little bit more about consulting. And there's a QR code at the top right or left. Not sure how that works.
Yeah.
I think it's top right. You can scan that with your smartphone. If you're on the computer, scan that with your smartphone. You can get in touch with Mickey.
Yeah, 100%.
Tell us a little more.
Yeah, just real quick. It's funny because you hear us talk a lot about scalability. And my company, consulting company as I have, is not scalable, and it's on purpose. There is a plethora of consulting companies out there right now. I'm sure you all have heard of them, Next Level, CEO Warrior, Praxis S10, Nexstar, Blue Collar Tradie. I mean, the list goes on and on. I probably could find 20 of them. And they're scalable because what they do is they build these online platforms where you pay them normally a pretty large sum of money, and then you have access to some systems and processes, and you have to edit them and adjust them and kind of figure out how you can use them in your system. That's not what I do. If you hire me, you get me. Like I get in the car, I get on the airplane, I come to your office, I interview your people, I look at what's going on in your business. As Dave Ramsey says, yes, it's good. You're gonna have to write a check for it. But here's where people get blocked sometimes. You can go hire an employee for $85,000 and look up in a year and them be 20% of where you think you would be in that year.
Right.
And they're coming in 8 hours a day, or you can pay somebody to get after it and get you where you need to be in an expedited amount of time. And then you can look up and go, oh my gosh, I have an employee manual now. I have a driver's policy, a facial hair policy, whatever, or sales training or management training, whatever it might be. So I can only handle a handful of clients at the time. I get rating reviews from them. I get recommendation letters, and I just keep that 4 or 5 client cycle going. It's not scalable because I really enjoy meeting my clients and working with them, one-on-one. And also because I have family, I don't spend a lot of time on the West Coast and all that like I used to back in the day when I was traveling. So I stay, pretty much Southeast and kind of East Coast type of stuff. So that's what I do. It's a very personalized experience, and all the pricing is very customized to what they're asking for and what the deliverable is.
All right. Well, check out the QR code, scan it with your smartphone, get a hold of Mickey Lyles. This guy is next level, man. He will help you scale. He will help you dissect and figure out the problems you're having in a day-to-day basis. And Lord knows we're all having problems in our businesses. It's not for the faint of heart. This is hard stuff that we're doing here. So just having somebody in your corner that you can talk to is invaluable. The biggest pivot point in my life and career was when I decided I don't have what it takes after all. And I decided to start leaning more into God and allowing him to direct my path. And he directed me to listening to other people, flat out, 100%. So I encourage you, if you're listening, find a coach, find some mentors, spend time with people that bring value, that uplift your spirit and make you feel good about your path, and stop forcing doors open. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, 100%, man. We're nothing without our faith and without what God can do for us.
Yep.
Like they say in Ephesians, like the good word says in Ephesians, he can do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine.
Yep. All right. Mickey Lyles.
Thank
Thank you, sir. Appreciate y'all.